I'm going live anyway. Hello, my fellow patriots. This is Alex with Disabled Vets Perspective. And yes, this is a surprise. I am live. And today, the reason I am live is because I'm still learning how to use a stupid computer. And I tried to do a recording and it wasn't allowing my bit of a shock to see me during the week going live. But this was a special request from one of my new subscribers. Her name is Sue. And we were watching an episode on Dabu 7, and that is, I'm going to say it out, spell it out. It's DAHBOO 77, Dabu 77. He just did a little episode about FEMA doing work with work in the area of Tennessee and doing earthquake readiness activity. The reason I'm doing a video on earthquake readiness is because I've been through 2 major earthquakes, and this young lady, Sue, is concerned because she lives in an area, don't mind the cat in the background, she lives in an area that is susceptible to quakes. Hey, Fred, everything sound okay? Am I sounding all right? I know I don't look all right, but I have to know about the sound. Anyway, wait for that response. But what I wanted to talk about was, okay, 2 thumbs up. Appreciate that. I was in Japan, and I know some of you have heard in my videos that I've been all over the world, and I pretty much have. This particular time, 1983, I lived in Japan. I lived in a little village called Misawa. It's quite a bit bigger now. Had an Air Force base there. And in 1983 or 82, one or the other, we had a major earthquake. It was an 8.3. Hey, Jarvis, how you doing? I know it's a surprise. I'm live. Like, what? But, that's all right. Hey, Tara. Tony, good to see you, brother. Glad you're out here. Anyway, in that earthquake, the ground was rolling and 3-foot swells. The only way we could stand up or do anything, we couldn't stand up. We had to lay down on our back, spread our arms and legs apart so that we didn't roll around like flopping fish. In Japan, they build everything in their buildings are all built on rockers so that the whole structure will move in one piece. So at a point during this earthquake, we could actually, on the ground, we looked right through underneath our house. We could see from all the way through to the backyard because the house was literally tipped up that far. It was one to make the sphincter pucker for sure. It was an experience. The second quake that I was in, I made it to Monterey, California, where I was going to be stationed at Fort Ord. And as soon as I got out of the front door of the airport, the ground started shaking, and it was a 7.1. And that was the Loma Prieta quake that destroyed the viaducts and the different structures throughout there. And the reason this is important is because I wanted to express that I have experience in it, and the lady named Sue that wants to know about how to get ready or how to survive an earthquake. I wanted to prove that I have some experience in it. Well, the reality is you can't get ready for an earthquake. You can have your provisions ready. You can recognize where you are at all times. For example, there are a lot of old wives' tales about when you're ending up in an earthquake that you want to jump under a door and you want to stand under a door frame. Well, I am a fabricator, an engineer, and a carpenter, and I can tell you that is absolutely false. If you think about the logic behind that, you have wall studs that go from the top plate of your house, which supports either your upper floor or your trusses. Those studs go straight down to the bottom plate, which is supported by the foundation. And if you have a doorway, you don't have studs that go from top to bottom. You have them they're called cripples and they're short little studs, so you don't even have the strength. So the best thing to do, if you can, is get out of the structure and try to get into the yard, get into an open space so that you don't have things potentially falling on you. Stay away from windows. Just be aware of your surroundings. Be prepared with an evacuation route, and use it if it's necessary. If you are in a building, a lot of these buildings are designed with anti-sway systems. They have cantilever systems that they're basically weights that counter the sway of a building. So the key to a building is you don't want to be near the outside walls. Buildings are built with a core and an outer structure. The core is typically where you find your elevators. That is very likely going to be the strongest part of your building. So you want to get to where the elevators are. You don't want to get into an elevator. But if you are in a situation where the ceiling is coming down, then the best spot to stand is in the frame of the elevator doors, which counters what I said a minute ago. But stand up against the wall or stand up against the doors, and you're covered by a frame over your head. So that will help protect you from debris falling. Now, those are the two things that I can think of that would really make sense. Either get away from the structure or get to the core of the structure. And that really only qualifies for high rises, because houses don't typically have a core structure. They are their exterior framing is their primary support. So what you need to do is, like I said, you can't really prepare yourself for an earthquake, but you can prepare your environment for an earthquake. One thing that I've done since I've been in 2 major earthquakes, I built my houses so that they are not on a monolithic slab, which is a solid piece of concrete stuck to the ground. My houses are up on pylons made out of concrete, and on top of those pylons are giant skids. So if this house, for example, were to fall off of the pylons, it would fall off in one piece. So all they would have to do is jack the thing back up and put it back on the pylons. The skids under my house are designed to move back and forth or side to side. And the pylons are designed to literally give way if they have to, because instead of them going through the floor of the house, it's better to have them crumble underneath the house and just have the house set down a little bit lower to the ground. So I designed that, even though I live in the panhandle of Florida. We don't have a high risk of earthquakes, but I've personally been through enough earthquakes that I don't care. That's the one event that you truly cannot predict. So the only way to be ready for it is just to make sure that you are built for it. And then if it happens, it happens. Yeah, Shonda, happy birthday, sweetheart. It's good. Glad to have you on here. I hope you have a fantastic day. Everybody, make sure you talk to Shonda, tell her happy birthday, give her good blessings. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I know this is weird to be live, but I was trying to get my recording done, and I couldn't get this thing to work on my computer camera, so it's just frustrating. I'm still learning the whole computer thing. If it has moving parts, I can rebuild it and take it apart, put it back together again, but computers don't have moving parts, so it's like there's no way to fix it. I just have to mess things up completely until I can get it figured out. But anyway, going back to the earthquakes, there are basically 2 types of earthquakes. You have a thrust, which is just the ground heaves underneath you, and then you have a shake, which a thrust, in my opinion, is probably the worst, because you get all of it at one time. Your peak of your earthquake comes up instantaneously, and then it tapers off. Whereas a shake you tend to get a little bit of a shimmy going on in the ground. You can get that warning, hey, great douchebag, good to see you. You get the warning, and you have a few seconds to make a move, and typically it's seconds. It's not, you don't have time to look at the watch. Well, it looks like we're going to get a quake today. No, you need to be moving into your safe spot in the structure or get out of the structure. So with a shake, they tend to give you a little time. With a thrust, you have no time. So all I can say is that just be prepared if you are in an earthquake environment. And typically, we have three areas in this country that are really a threat with earthquakes. We have the New Madrid Fault, which actually goes from the Great Lakes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, and it basically follows the Mississippi. A lot of people don't realize that's a fairly major fault line. Um, Back in the 1800s was the last major quake on the New Madrid, and it actually moved the Mississippi River over. Um, the the quake was no nobody has any idea really how big it was, but the scientists that studied some of the effect from it say it was probably in the range of an 8 point. Um, the the point scale with earthquakes is a 7.0 and an 8.0 are not slightly different. It's like 1,000 times the strength of from one point to the other. So a 7.1 is going to inconveniently move your property and destroy things, but an 8.1 is approaching cataclysmic. If you don't have the structures built for that kind of shaking, then they're falling. There's no way around it. So, anywho, um, the next one that I want to talk about is the Cascadia Fault, and it is up in the northern Pacific. Um, let's see, the Cascadia, pulled it up here. It's basically off the coast of Oregon and Washington State. And according to another channel that I listen to, that FEMA is up there doing earthquake drills, and they call their threat imminent. And the imminent threat usually means something bad's going to happen. They just don't know exactly when. So they've been doing a lot of drilling up there, and now my laptop is trying to be slow. But anyway, I was going to give some idea of what the Cascadia Fault does, but it's a subduction zone. The A subduction zone means that the one tectonic plate, is moving under the other. So in a subduction zone, you get a plate that's pushing pressure against another plate by rolling underneath it. And when this pressure releases, you get all of a sudden an earthquake. Well, that that kind of thing will cause tsunamis. So if you're in an earthquake zone that is low lying, coastal, as soon as you feel that shaking, you need to be getting gone. You need to be going to a high structure, if that's the only option, or you need to get to high country. You need to get away from the coastline, because tsunamis are the real deal. Even if you survive an earthquake with a little shaking of the ground, if you're not gone before that tsunami, the survival rates decrease drastically. So, hey Patty, hey Nanya, how you doing? Um, you need to be getting to high ground. So if you're on a coast, just as soon as you feel some shaking, you need to be moving. If it turns out to not be a threat of tsunami, then you're better off if you're already heading in that direction to find out, instead of waiting until they tell you it's absolutely coming and then decide to start running to high ground, because then it's too late. In the Cascadia region up in uh, Washington and Oregon, um, you will have minutes to make your move, because the subduction zone is so close to the coastline that the tsunami that would follow could be on shore within 20 to 30 minutes. So you need to be moving with an expedited rate of speed to get to high ground. Um, Going to the San Andreas Fault in California, just about the whole length of California, um, that one is another major issue. Those earthquakes happen. We've seen them constantly. When I lived in California, I mean, earthquakes were fairly common, but most of them were at levels that most people couldn't see. If it was anything around a 4 point or less, we just typically slept through them. But the big quakes happen, and they will happen again. So in California, you need to be ready to move because it's going to happen. You need to have your provisions, and that makes my transition into prepping a little bit. Um, some of the things you can do for earthquake prepping, going back to the coastline. If you live on the coastline and you know that your water table is pretty high, there's a good chance of a thing called liquefaction, and that's where when the ground starts to shimmy, it brings the groundwater to the surface, and you literally end up with a sinking situation. It becomes essentially quicksand. What you need to be doing there is you need to have a structure outside of your home that you can have for your provisions, your food, your water, your dry ammunition, do whatever it takes, the prepping things. But you need to have that structure on either flotation pods or laying 50-gallon drums, plastic drums on their side and tying them together and putting them underneath the floor of your structure so that if you get liquefaction, instead of losing that building down into the ground, you'll have flotation, which will keep it up. So all of your provisions that you've saved up are safe. Um, Another option is if you don't have a situation where you're at risk for liquefaction, the best thing to do is to use a garden shed, for example, jack the thing up and put casters underneath it. It's best to pour a concrete slab under it and then put casters on it. So instead of the building shaking and twisting and getting everything broken, you had the whole building moving on that slab in one piece. So uh, you don't lose your building with your staple foods and your preps. Hey Scott, glad you're in here, man. Appreciate that. Drop it like a Scott. Oh wait a minute, that's Father's thing, so I can't do that. Copyright material, but no. Um, anyway, so you want to keep your stuff in a dry structure outside of the home, and you want to make sure that your structure is equipped to deal with the environment that you're surrounded by. You want to either have flotation underneath that structure for the risk of liquefaction for coastal areas and even areas that have large lakes that you can have a risk of liquefaction. So you need to be building that structure, getting it on flotation so that if anything happens, your foods and your things that you need are safe. Um, the other thing is, in the immediate aftermath of an earthquake, two things you need to do, and I mean it immediately. You need to kill the power to your house, and you need to turn off your gas. Once the earthquake is over, then you can look at everything and you can make sure that your facilities are intact, that your gas isn't leaking, that your electric's not sparking. But that should be absolutely first. If you can do it on the way out of a structure, that's good, um, because if the structure fails, then even getting into it to turn off these systems could be dangerous. But it is critical because after earthquakes, one of the number one causes of death and destruction are the fires. One way to prevent that: killing electric, killing gas, because you're taking two of the equations that start the fires out. Um, with with Sue, I hope she has. I doubt she's going to be in here on the live show, but I hope this has helped her to get ready for the potential. Like I said, you cannot You can't predict an earthquake, but you can have your stuff ready for an earthquake. You protect your person first, and then you protect your provisions, um, ammunition protection, food, water, in a dry facility with equipment so that it can either float or that it can move freely without twisting and turning. It's the only way you're going to protect it. The other thing, inside your structure that you choose to keep your preps, a fire suppression system is a really good idea because if you're not home and something happens to spark in your food shed, then it burns to the ground, even if you have fire extinguishers in there, because you're not there to use them. So, some sort of a fire suppression system to protect your commodities, your food, your water, your ammunition, whatever you have in your prep structure, you need to be ready to put out fire. It needs to be able to do it itself. You need to have a system in place to kill that fire before it would ever burn your provisions, and be prepared for it. Hey Jim, good to see you. What a surprise! I know I'm live. Everybody's just like, what? But anyway, Sue, I appreciate you subscribing to my channel. I hope this has given you some comfort. I know earthquakes are bad, but as long as you have what you need in place for after the earthquake, then you're a step ahead of the people around you. Um, so anyway, that's what I've got, y'all. I appreciate the hell out of you guys showing up. Man, I got a good group of people in here. That's great for a spur of the moment decision to go live. Oh, computers, they're so evil. Um, Jim, Knight's Armory in the house. Yes, indeed. Um, I appreciate him. He's helped me a lot, but he's not here to help me figure out why my microphone isn't allowing the pickup on my computer camera system. So I can blame him for that. But anyway, y'all, you know my final words. You guys stay in the fight. We'll see y'all next time.